fellow slingers, and welcome back to Roll the Hard 20 podcast. We have a special episode of Rolling for 20, and with it, a very special guest, a man I have known for over 3 decades, an esteemed author, an amazing artist, a great man, and an awesome brother, and the creator of the logo for the podcast. I'm proud to have in the studio of the Rage Room with me, Samwise Didier.
Thank you, Brother Ryder. Good to be back in the Rage Room.
Hey. So, Sammy, welcome back. Only this time in a more official capacity as a guest, not a guest player. Welcome back. Now, we go back, you and I.
How far back?
We go
way back.
We go way back. Decades. Now, you're known for your amazing pictures of fantasy adventure. Can you give us some insight as to what brought you to that style that you're known so well for?
Well, I would have to say that the biggest influence on me growing up was my father would pick me up from elementary school. He'd get off work at like 3:30, and I got off around the same time. We would almost every day go cruise by the 7-Eleven or Stop and Go, whatever it was, and that's when I'd hit the spinner rack, which is where they used to sell comic books when we were kids.
Oh, comic books. I was thinking of something else when you said spinner rack.
Yeah. No, that sounds like a spider. The sinister spinner rack. No, the 7-Eleven or Stop and Go would have just all these random comics.
I remember that.
Yeah,
back
Spider-Man,
in the day,
and it wasn't like we didn't have comic book shops back then. It was you got your comics at grocery stores or in little convenience stores like that. So I would go and I would look through. I'd pick up a Spider-Man or Batman, Superman, stuff like that. But I always tended to go to Conan the Barbarian. That was always my favorite for some reason. So my first introduction to fantasy was Conan. Probably that's what started me on my path because I was around 5 or 6. I remember getting busted. I was at Montessori school, and I don't remember
checking out the spinner rack.
My mom was in the office talking with the principal or teacher, and I remember looking at one of my Conan books there. Well, apparently they had called my mom in because I had brought a Conan book to school, and it was, it had violence and it had, sword and sorcery and magic and, all that kind of stuff. I was just sitting there reading
arts of Conan.
And I believe, too, it was specifically Conan, even though I did have an issue of, it was called Son of Satan, which was an old Marvel comic. Yeah, it was like totally...
Just total pedestrian title.
That one wasn't the thing that was offensive. It was Conan. Maybe I'm remembering it wrong. Maybe it was the son of Satan that brought them in. But either way, I didn't get in trouble for it. But that was my first sort of foray into fantasy stuff. I've always also loved dinosaurs. I used to have those old dinosaur books that they'd had in elementary school where there were just these killer paintings of dinosaurs. And dinosaurs are just, in my opinion, somewhat weaker version than dragons. Dragons, of course, are way cooler than dinosaurs.
That's right. And their arms are full length.
Yeah, they could scratch their chin. And then it probably from there moved on to when I was about 7 years old, the 1977 animated Hobbit movie came out. And I remember seeing that either on TV, and I do remember seeing it at school at one time, but that totally just took it from a standard dude with a sword to now there were these little small dudes called hobbits and hairy dudes named dwarves and, pretty dudes named elves and, things like that. So that really introduced me to more of the high fantasy and not the sword and sorcery sort of stuff. But that's where it all started. Conan comic books, The Hobbit, and, basically my pops grabbing me comic books after school and reading them after that.
What's funny is everything that you've mentioned at some point I can totally relate to. Because the first time I saw a G.I. Joe comic was...
Dude, this is about me. I'm just kidding.
I'm going to edit that out. was episode 21, The Silent Interlude.
Oh, that
it was on
easy reading.
Yeah, I thought they were all like that. I'm like, isn't this supposed to have words? But it was on a spinner rack at a Stop and Go. And then, obviously, I knew your dad very well. Mr. D, one to you. Conan, we first met over a comic.
That's right.
In high school.
Episode 123 or something?
123 with the three witches or whatever.
Vina. Yeah, that was a funny story because we had one of the people in our history class. She kind of resembled the profile of Vina, which, she was kind of a withered witch. No, it's not. But every time we'd see her, we'd be at Vina. No, she didn't know we were
know.
even talking about her. But yeah, so that was we were kind of dicks.
Yeah. Those poor bastards. But yeah, I totally remember all your when we had an apartment together, you had drawn this dragon that had led out of your room, down the hallway,
right.
around the corner, and into the living room. There's this large, bloody dragon with blood coming out of its mouth and everything. I totally remember that was just hilarious. And we didn't get our deposit back. But we did leave them a shopping cart full of empty beer cans.
Yeah, and
to compensate.
5 cents a piece. That should have...
Shit.
Well, I think I did...
adds up.
I did tell you this. Okay, so dear listeners, the DM, Brian, my brother Ryder, was notorious for some reason going after flies that would land on walls or ceilings, and he'd go after them with broom handles or swords or his fists. And so we had a ceiling that looked basically like the texture of SpongeBob SquarePants. It had holes in it all over. So we didn't get, or let me change that. He didn't get the security deposit back. I think you were maybe in the military at the time.
No, I was back out.
You were back, but I got the security deposit, what was left. It was like $30, and I just said, you know what? I'm holding on to this because...
Well, you did pick the Christmas tree that year.
Yeah, and I think you picked the couch from the garbage.
I did. Came complete with a bunch of bottle caps. So, anyways, moving on. Like me, you've been playing D&D for years. I know we both started at different places in our lives. Mine was with the neighborhood kids. But what prompted you to take up the D20 and start rolling?
So I basically started playing D&D because I used to go to this toy store that was near my house. My mom and dad would go to Lucky's Supermarket. I don't even know if Lucky's is still around, but there was a place.
They weren't lucky enough to stick around. Their luck ran out. They rolled a 1.
Roll the hard fumble. But there was a place called Toy Express. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And
I do.
that is
that was
where-
right next to the shopping center. We lived close by.
Yeah, that was the shopping
Was that
center
a
we went to in
Lucky's though,
Yorba
or
Linda.
was that an Albertsons?
It was a Lucky's.
Oh, okay.
Back in the day, yeah. And this might have even been before maybe you started going there. I don't know. But I know that they had Toy Express, and they had this section of, was it Ralpartha? Is that how you pronounce it? The
Ralpartha.
miniatures. And then they had all these D&D modules. And I remember going there just looking at it for the art, right? It was so cool, all that art back then. And there were all these dudes always in there, like they were older than me, but they were just big old nerds, like, hey, when the new edition, you can play a monk. And you mean a cleric? No, I mean a monk. It's like just full on. It's basically how we talk now about D&D. But these were the.
But we're cool talking about it.
Yeah, we're totally cool.
So we say the F word.
That's right, dude. Those fucking idiots. So I remember listening to them going like, oh my God, this just sounds like really weird and convoluted, but I like the artwork. I like the miniatures. So that always sort of got me into that. Then, I don't know, maybe it was months later, I believe I was in 6th grade, and a buddy of mine who was in 7th grade used to play Dungeons and Dragons, but he couldn't anymore because his parents didn't allow him to.
That's right, because he
the
was
devil,
Satan's son. He was the son of Satan.
summoning demons, wizard. Anyway, so we didn't have any of the dice. We didn't have any of the books. So he just made up these adventures that we would play, me and, brother Eric.
Oh,
and
yeah.
because we were 12, we were, had to be at home on school nights or whatever it was. So we would call each other and we would play over the phone with 6-sided dice. And basically
cool.
the way it worked was, because everyone has a board game that has 6-sided dice. So we would take a 6-sided dice and we basically had it where it was 1 to 3 to hit, 4, 5, 6 is a miss, right? So thinking back, when you had a +1 sword, that was pretty damn good. You just upped your odds.
Yeah,
and then
totally.
it was like if you had a +3 sword, you never missed. So we eventually, though, we played that, and I still remember the first thing I killed was a barbarian, and I remember going like, oh, did I just kill Conan? Like thinking that, back to my old childhood comic book hero.
Lamenting the loss of somebody you just murdered.
Yeah. And
He was only drinking wine with a woman.
I heard the lamentations of the barbarian. But I remember playing that, and I go, this is super fun. And then eventually, I think it was around this time that they started reissuing, or no, it was the 2nd edition D&D, the one that had the player's handbook and the with the guys climbing up the statue and prying out the eyeballs.
See, now you and I have had disagreement about that because I remember
that was earlier.
But I remember you said you wanted to play second edition one time, and I brought the second edition. You're like, no, that's the second edition. I meant the second edition. That's the first edition. You're thinking of original D&D. It went original and then first edition with the thieves that were climbing up the.
So which one is that one?
That's first edition.
Oh, okay, that's the one that.
That's the one that I remember very well.
Okay, so and the DM's guide had like the Ifrit, the red demon guy on the cover.
Yes, and he had that flaming sword in his hand.
Yeah, and the monster manual was that light blue cutaway ground one that showed
that was
like
weird.
all the really
showed
bad
like
artwork.
the owlbear underground and the cave troll and all that weird
and
stuff.
they had like I think a red dragon or a unicorn on it. No, that was the unicorn. I think wasn't that on the?
Might have been on the backside.
Yeah,
because when you opened up the covers, you could see like the whole mural of the
and deities and demigods. Like I actually had a copy of it that had the Cthulhu and Melnibonian myths. Did you remember those?
Yeah, I didn't read it, but I heard about that years later about how they had to revamp it to something else. They retitled it.
It was
cut that part out.
Yeah, they had like there was deities and demigods, and then they changed it into something else and legends or something like that. I don't remember. But anyways, those were the books that I kind of grew up on, and I remember going to this D&D convention at the Sheridan in Anaheim on Catella, and that's when they were like unmasking or releasing the Monster Manual 2, and that was a whole new friggin' world for me because I know you were always a fan of the Fiend Folio. The darker stuff.
I love the Fiend Folio,
dude. The Monster Manual 2 totally just like brought in more demons and more giant types. Remember, I think it brought in those really dumb, like 20-sided dice-looking characters or triangle figures. Remember those guys? They were like circles and squares with arms and legs, and they were just dumb. I remember, like, I'd never have fought or played against those.
I think they re-envisioned those for 5th edition, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I've never been a fan of stuff that looks goofy like that.
Yeah, it was
I'm
always
more
like...
of like the shock and the fear factor of when you're adventuring. You should be shitting your pants. This shouldn't be a walk in the park. Oh, look how cute. I mean, like you had that... wolf in sheep's clothing where it had the bunny on the stump and the whole stump was an actual beast. Now it's kind of a goofy monster by today's standard, but I mean, that's what it should be like. Everything that looks cute should still be able to totally fuck you up. And that should only be like a minimal appearance of it. You know, you look at the Death Knight or the Gith or
the
something.
Gith Yankee.
Totally, you know. Yeah, those guys are.
That's another thing, right? So I was just mentioning earlier that we had someone that looked like Vina from the old Conan comic, The Witch, at our school. We used to see, I don't know, maybe this is when we were finally old enough to go out to taverns and have sarsaparillas with the grown-ups. But there'd be a lot of the people there that were sort of had been drinking and smoking for a while and were very thin, and we would say they looked like the Gith Yankee, you know, like it was like, where's her silver cord, you know?
Cut that, send you back.
Where's his silver sword, you know? Like, yeah, that was, we sure had a lot of fun at other people's expenses through D&D.
We did.
God, I love Dungeons
and now
Dragons.
I hope they're having fun listening to us at our expense.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Little off topic here. Could you please explain to the listeners what a slinger is, what a hard slinger is?
Okay.
This is something from us. This.
Do people not know?
If they probably do by now, but it was something that we had created with our group.
Yeah. So there's 2 stories. I will go with this one because it's more appropriate to our topic right now. So slinging. We used to, hang out, and instead of saying things like, "Hey, do you want to role play or play Dungeons and Dragons this weekend?" It's like, "Hey, do you want to sling some dice this weekend? Roll the bone, sling some dice." Because it kind of came from the term like gunslingers, right? Like you have, gunslingers were quick on the draw and shooting, quick shot, deadly, that kind of stuff. So, we'd be sitting there, boom, slinging dice, That's sort of where it comes from. And that's where we changed it to, "Hey, you up for slinging this weekend?" So that's sort of where it comes from. So when I heard that you started calling the group the Hard Slingers, I was like, that's fucking badass.
That's
so
right.
Like, yeah, some of them didn't get it. I'm like, what? How could they not? This is obviously common knowledge to our small circle of friends.
That's right.
But again, I'm still hanging out with the same people that I've met in elementary and junior and high school. So the small circle has always been this size. It's been a good circle.
It's been a tight circle. I like that
right.
circle. Now, I remember back to a time when we both didn't play D&D, when we were still hanging out and, always hanging out. And then we did play D&D. I remember Tony telling us about the levers and all this other happy crap.
We need to tell that story. That was always a good one.
And then we went back on hiatus, and then eventually we both came back to it right around the same time. You came back and started with 4th edition, and when I came back, I started picking up the basic books that I had sold off years ago. What kind of brought you back into the fold of wanting to play D&D at that time? If you could remember, because this is like over a decade ago at this point.
Yeah, probably even more than that. Huh?
Yeah.
And it usually is the same sort of thing. Is I sort of have a saying in my life. It's like I don't want to be living in other people's worlds, meaning I don't want to find entertainment playing other people's creations and video games and movies and things like that. I enjoy it, but there's a lot of times where people will let that rule their life. And it's, I come from an artistic background and I work with a lot of artists. And it's like, what did you do? What did you create this weekend? Oh, I binge watched X and it wasn't that great. Or I did this or that.
Is that a show?
Yeah. X-Files? No.
Oh.
No, binge
what?
watch. I meant X, like a random.
I gotta add this to my queue.
Dude,
no,
is that on Netflix? They got season 5 of X. Like DMX, right? What? Anyways, that's it. So I basically had found myself returning to Dungeons and Dragons over the years because it's not a world that someone else really created. Yeah, they came up with the rules and things like that, but we would come up with adventures. We would come up with characters. Our characters would have history. Characters would meet previous characters that we've had, and we go, "Oh, I remember that guy was a dick," or whatever. Or, they were creations that we came up with, that we had a history with. And I always enjoyed that because it was something we were making. And, we could have this sort of tribal knowledge of, oh, dude, remember that one time we were playing this guy? Oh, yeah, dude, he did this, blah, blah, blah. And it was just this sort of, we'd have our own house rules. We would take the bones of what D&D gave us, and we'd make our own crit charts. So when you roll a 20, instead of it being some just boring sort of thing, we'd roll it and like, oh yeah, on a 00, the dude's head comes off, and on a 76, it's triple damage, and he loses a finger or something.
It's a pike in the eye.
Yeah, what was the? It was like Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah, the Dim Mac.
We had all these like just funny names from things from our past. Like when we'd screw up a word or something, we'd put that in, and it would become part of the crit chart, and that was just super fun. Like we were creating our own entertainment. Like anytime someone asked me, what's your favorite game? Usually nowadays they mean video game. I always say tabletop, Dungeons and Dragons. Because board games, okay, those are fun, but they kind of, I don't know.
They start and finish.
Yeah.
And they never really deviate outside
you can't
of
build
their,
on them.
Yeah, you can't, there's no depth to them. It's all linear. At some point you will get to the end of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't really rely on somebody else's input to alter the direction of the narrative.
Yeah.
It's
and
like,
if a game gets boring, like your D&D game, make a new character, make a new campaign.
Yeah.
Put the other one on hold.
I mean, I can't count how many times these guys had like altered the course of the tracks that I had. I don't want to say I railroaded them, but I mean, I had a structure that they were going to hit certain beats and whatnot. And they've diverged outside of those guidelines. Fucked it up, didn't I?
No. I was just thinking of times when we did things that didn't go along with your story.
Yeah, and it's
the boat on fire.
Yeah. I still don't think we used sleep right on that one.
I think it went perfect.
From a flavor standpoint, it was very effective.
Very memorable.
Yeah, you destroyed that entire boss fight. I appreciate that.
So yeah, some of my greatest gaming experiences have been playing Dungeons and Dragons, and a lot of them have been with you. A lot of them with some of my buddies at work. Like we had a D&D campaign that lasted for 3 years by email, and it would take a long time. So we would maybe do a post or two a day, and then that was it. But I remember like when it was finally over, my character was a dwarven thief who basically we changed it to where he was sort of a dwarven version of a druid, meaning he was master of the wilds underground. So he had an affinity with spiders and snakes and rats and things that are underground, whereas an elfie druid would have forest and deers and owls and all that stuff. So he was like One of his critters was named Omnis.
Yeah.
I named him after one of your characters.
Awesome.
It was a little spider that he had that was like super toxically lethal, but the amount was nothing. So he had to, like, I don't know if you milk a spider, whatever it was, collect the venom.
Show me how you milk a spider. Come on, fucker.
Can you milk me? I was doing the little nipple fingers in front of the mic. But there's something just about being able to create your own worlds and play in them and have it be able to be done so simple and quick. Even you don't even need the books nowadays. And I've played it where you don't even need the dice. You just need regular 6-sided dice. You can do whatever. It's all about the personality you bring to your character and the DM's story and your ability to create and invent and on the spot. Like, that is just the most fun. We've done it with all of our buddies in our group for 30 years now, and we're still doing it. We're talking about it right now
on a podcast. What's funny is I've heard from different people about certain editions can't be role played, and I just completely disagree with that. I think that people rely too much on the mechanics rather than having a good narrative driving the story, and I think that an entire session can be nothing but role playing, regardless of the edition. And that being said, do you have a particular favorite edition, or does it really not matter to you? Or do you flavor more of the story over the mechanics?
I've enjoyed all the editions. Like, I used to really remember loving the first edition. Is that right?
That's right.
And I look back at that now and go, oh my God, there's so many little wonky things. And I even remember, I think we were going to go back and play it, right? We ended up not for some reason, but I think all of them, just
because
like
I brought the wrong books. Because you said bring the second edition books, and I brought this second edition. You're like, what the fuck is this?
He's beaten this horse in two. We now have 2 dead half horses. But I really enjoyed, what was it? Was 4th edition the one with all the feet, the different things? So I enjoyed elements of that because I usually end up playing like some sort of fighter warrior type, and in that one, as a basic attack, they basically gave you the equivalent of what wizards have as cantrips. So my character, Tyrannus, who I brought back to the rage room here.
And we will be talking about him.
He would be able to taunt someone to make him attack him, which is great. He would be able to do something like a cleave, which would hit the main target and then do strength damage on the other one. He would be able to do something where I could bump a guy out of a square into the next one. Therefore, like, whoever the mage was getting pounded on at the time didn't get a attack of opportunity if he left. But there were lots of things I could do in any given game. Now, we can do that now. I just have to go, DM, I want to try to do this. All right, well, you better roll off on that. And then we rolled off.
And that's usually what we do.
Yeah, and it's like, so you can do it either way. I just enjoyed that. That one, though, was a bit heavy. Combat took too long because everyone was flipping through papers and dailies and encounters, and that sucked, right? I hated that part. But I also...
And that was the hardest part of that, which is, I think we curtailed that by making a percentage whether or not you could get the encounter or the daily off.
And it also encouraged people who are like really bean countery, and they're always like, well, I will make this specific build and I will do, it didn't allow for interpretation or having fun. Like, hey, DM, I'm going to try to run and jump and bounce off this. What are my odds? Well, you got to roll this. Okay, let's try it. I enjoy that sort of thing. Awarding people or not necessarily awarding or rewarding, but allowing people to be heroic. In D&D, I hate it when it's like, yeah, I'm a warrior. I have a 12 strength. It's like, that's stupid. Like, he should be at least 16. Otherwise, throw it away. Like, I want my character to be heroic. I want him to be able to do things that the normal human or orc or halfling of my race can't do. And so by having those abilities, it makes me want to not play timid and be a bit more bold.
Well, yeah, because you can't just march into your boss's office and take him down or something like that.
You can once.
But I'm just saying, like, in a game where it's left up to your imagination, you can do whatever you want. There's nothing holding you back from anything. And if you have that rapport with the DM, then you could role play to your heart's extent. It doesn't matter. It's like, well, I want to do this. Yeah, well, let's roll off. That sounds badass. Let's chuck these dice out. Let's see who gets the highest roll. We'll come up with a solution to this. Because I want to see the players succeed as much as I want to see my monsters succeed. as a DM.
Yeah.
You know, I'm rooting for
I
my
don't like that
monsters
part.
too. Yeah, well, I'm
Not
rooting
me.
for you guys. I'm rooting, you know, I didn't put this fight together for no reason at
be
all. I mean,
boring.
yeah, right. We're not going to sit there and play board games in this fight.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, another edition that I really liked was the very first one, not first edition, but the previous basic thing where it's like I was
Yeah,
an
the red
elf
box,
and I
right?
was it was the red box, but it was the early version of that. Like the red
Oh,
box
that's the
was the
mold day.
reintroduction of it.
Yes, the one by Menser.
I believe this was more similar where it was like a halfling was a class. Same with a dwarf, same with an elf. Like it wasn't an elf ranger or a dwarven,
Yeah.
warrior or a halfling rogue. It was a halfling, and he had roguey type things, and the elf had innate magic and things like that, and the dwarf was innately sturdier. Again, I like being able to try different combinations. Like I'm not really I don't like playing the standard like, oh well, you're an elf and I'm going to be a wizard. It's like I'd rather play a class that's not associated necessarily with an elf, or play them the opposite. Like we'll chat more about it like when we get to the Tyrannus part.
Yeah, and we will get to him. So, being both a player and a DM.
Hell yeah, I'm a player.
That's right. What do you prefer? Do you prefer DMing or do you prefer being a player at a table?
I prefer being a player just because it allows me to not have to necessarily be as balanced or think about the entire picture, where a DM is like the maestro and composing the story, the orchestra, and all that sort of stuff, and making sure everything works. I've never known the rules as well as any DM. Like maybe back when it was the first edition with the 3 books, I knew everything.
Keep beating that dead horse, aren't you?
We got some quarter horses now. No, these ones aren't as fast. But I knew those really well. But as the newer systems came out, I figured I was more of a star player than a manager. Like I liked having the opportunity to be different people, where a DM kind of has to know the rules and, play by them to ensure the whole party is having fun. As a player, I can choose to be a dick with other party members. I can choose to be helpful, or I can be flaky, whatever it is. A DM kind of has to make sure that everything's flowing the right way. And that's why I like being a player. I think it's to me, it's, it probably boils down to a lot as an artist. Like as an artist, I get to create a lot of worlds all the time. And when I want to relax, I don't necessarily want to have to be doing the same sort of thing. I want to be able to play as a character in this new world we're creating together,
Now, as a DM, though, you make it seem very effortless. I mean, when I've played in your games and you've ran them, it just seemed like you had a great strategic brain for the things that you were doing, as well as a compelling narrative. Going for the man's one true love, which was his fucking dog.
Hey, man.
Stuff like that. I mean, I
remember that. That was an odd one, but it worked out pretty well.
I remember being sick for that. We were playing up at the cabin.
That's
Remember,
right,
I was freaking dying. Probably
I like to DM, and when I do DM, it's more of I don't try to. I usually try to make it like a one issue Conan, right? Where it's when you sit down at the table, you're going to have a story that's sort of fun. You don't have to think too much, though. Hopefully, if I do it right, there will be a surprise where you're like, the guys are fighting over their one true love, and it's this fucking dog. It's like, man's best friend. Oh, I get, like it has a little bit of the humor or tongue in cheek, but I kind of like it to where it can wrap up. Having the big long story is cool, but I don't know if I don't regularly play as much to be able to do that. And in my spare time, I could be working on an elaborate Dungeons and Dragons story, or I could be working on artwork and stories for my other things that I want to work on.
Right.
So I really enjoy being able to drop by, even if it's once a week, and really get into that session and really give it all, and then be able to go, okay, well, what am I going to do next week? Instead of having to worry like, well, shit, they just went the wrong way and they triggered all these traps and they're dead. How do I make them not dead and come back to life, and then have to explain it in the story? So both are fun, but I kind of like being the player on the field instead of the manager. Less responsibility.
Well, when you create your character that you like to play, do you call upon these past inspirations during your character build? Stuff that you've read, like Conan and The Hobbit and all that other stuff. You know, what's your inspiration for when you build that character?
Pretty much every player or every character that I play, I want to be different than what I am in life. I don't understand people who want to play a human character, whether it's a wizard or a cleric or anything like that, because to me, I play a human every day. Now, on Friday and Saturday, I play the dwarf a lot, as you can attest to some of our weekend adventures.
Absolutely.
With the sarsaparillas at the taverns, looking at the Githyank. But yeah, and it's same with video games. I always like playing the monsters. Like when I play D&D, I want to be a half-orc or a dragonborn or something different. Even if it's like a halfling. I don't want to be a halfling rogue. I want to be a halfling warrior. It's like I want to be this little tiny tank encased in plate mail that's charging into the fray, where most people, they go, oh yeah, I want to do the big badass guy. It's like, okay, I like playing either something that's non-human and monstrous, because I can get into that monstrous sort of, role. And it's fun to role play monsters, whether they're against society and don't give a shit about humanity, or they're taunted by humanity and trying to always fit in, even though they never will. If it's
only half of them will fit in.
Yeah.
If you're a half orc.
That's right. What was that? What did I call?
Half of you could stay.
What did I call Rafu, the half man or something? That's right.
Half of you can stay, the other half's got to leave. So you're just standing in the doorway drinking one half of your mouth.
So, no orcs allowed, so you're just halfway in. Am I good? But I definitely like playing something that is not something that I would normally see. Now, going further on that, I also don't like the new round of D&D stuff where you got people who are playing like crystal shard people and half feathered, half whatever. It's like now it's just getting all wanky. It's like I like the sort of classic crayon box.
Yeah.
Not the small one that has 6 colors. The one that has like 12 or 18, right? Like where there's a nice variety, but now the blues aren't starting to all look the same and they're just called different. Or
being a colorblind individual, they all look the same to me anyways.
Yeah.
And that's not being racist.
You're racist against
Totally, they're all blues.
Yeah, is that why your pictures at Macaroni Grill always look so shitty when you drew on the tablecloth?
I do. I require adult supervision. I need an adult. Here.
Yeah, I love playing something that I'm not normally in real life. Like, again, like you were saying, you can't go in and tell your boss off and stuff like that. Well, in D&D, I don't want to be limited to my human capabilities, whether I'm strong or not. Like I've never played like Conan the Barbarian. To me, that I love Conan as a character in a story. I wouldn't want to play him because he's just a human with a sword. Now that's cool,
And one hell of a libido.
Yeah. And
that's why I want to play.
And a thick noggin too. He always gets smacked on the head and wakes up later. But yeah, it's like with Street Fighter, I always played Blanca, right? Samurai. Yeah, remember him?
Yeah.
Just like
chunk.
Massive red hair, electrocuting everything. Like, yeah, just that kind of. I like playing the
looking
beast.
for Blanca.
What about you? You actually tend to play humans a lot, don't you?
Because they're quick and easy. I don't have to think about the intricacies of what their races might boost them or inhibit them. I just want to go in and do some action.
That's funny because like as the DM, you totally labor over all these different things, and as a player, I labor over all these things. But if you're a player, you want to get into the thing, and as a DM, I'm like, hey, I want a simple story and just get rolling. Like it's similar mentalities, but you.
But on different
I would
sides,
say you like DMing more than playing. Would that be right?
Yeah, I like DMing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's times that I like to enjoy a good story. That's why I like good one-offs or even like a 2 or 3 session thing. I like to experience that because I like to let loose a little without having to worry about, okay, where's this page at? Or, am I paying enough attention to this person who may be looking at their phone? Or, am I losing this guy's attention? Or is she paying attention? Or, I want to make sure everybody is involved, is invested in the story. Like, Vratislav, what are you going to do? And, Junior, what's going on over there? That wasn't supposed to do that. But I remember one time I thought,
Rafu, what are you going to do? I'm going to roll the wrong dice.
I thought Eric was like not interested in the story because he kept looking at his phone. And at the end, I'm like, what's the matter, man? You didn't dig what was going on? He's like, No, man, somebody hacked into my bank account and they like ran off with like a couple grand. I'm like, dude, why didn't you tell me?
Eric Rodislav.
Yes.
Oh, I thought you meant our brother Eric. I'm like, what? They run off with $20?
He's got no fucking money, anyways. No, I guess while we were playing, he was getting identity theft going on. I'm like, why didn't you just say stop? He's like, I was having fun. Oh, I could tell.
Yeah,
there's my man right there.
We're in the game,
Yeah.
Hey.
Priorities.
Yeah.
Money will always grow back on that tree. But this is tonight.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just.
Well, when I met you, you were, writing this big story for Christmas. You used to, write short stories or poems or things like that for Christmas gifts. I would always draw a picture of something.
Yeah.
Creating a character on picture, on a page is similar for me creating a character for D&D, and like writing a story is similar to writing an adventure. It's like kind of cool how those things tie together.
Yeah, I like DMing though. I do, and I like I said, if somebody's a good DM, I like being in their story. If I've been in other DMs games and I haven't been, it hasn't held my attention long enough to say keep running it.
Yeah.
Or I want to stay in this group or not. I just, I could always say that I'm thankful that with you and Tony and Eric and myself and even Mick, we've never had a trouble player. And that's a blessing,
Except Mick with that wand of wonders.
Yeah, he blasted the whole party in front of us. Way to
Fireball!
Go, Mick. He rolled it, came out fireball. Boosh.
Oh, man.
But yeah, I mean, having played in the public venue out there, you could find other people that really go out of their way at times to make your game uncomfortable. So the best way to do that is to run the game.
Yeah.
Then you're in control of the game and stuff. And you pick a good group of people to play with, and we're still playing a couple of years later, so that's really good. And you and I, we're still playing decades later, so that's even good too. So when I first informed you that I was going to put together this podcast, I'd asked for your help with the logo. In case anybody doesn't know, Sammy, of course, is the one who designed this beautiful logo. And if you haven't seen it, head on over to rollthehard20podcast.com and check that out. You would also be found on Spotify.
And the Amazon link to get the T-shirt.
That's right. Don't forget that. Hyperlink on the website.
You're just shilling now.
Totally. What was your creative process for divining this awesome staple of our podcast?
Probably the inspiration was the name. Roll the hard 20. I mean, it's hard enough to roll a 20, right? It's like you got 1 in 10 chance to do it, right?
All right, hang on a second. The math is right.
Yeah, thanks, Rafu.
Perception failed.
Keep your eye on the dice.
That's right.
No, but when I heard, roll the hard 20 and the hard slingers, I don't know, it sort of conjured images of like sort of this might be going way too off, but like the 7 Samurai, Magnificent 7 going up against insurmountable odds. It's like, okay, well, rolling a 20 is hard enough, but what if everything else was a 1? Fumbling everything except for you got to either get the 20 or you fumble, you fail.
Because every other face on that die is a 1.
Yeah.
And it's got axes and mace and broken shafts and arrows.
Everything was thrown at it, and in more of a graphic interpretation, not necessarily realistic, but everything was thrown at it to stop the person from succeeding, and still rolled the hard 20.
I love that. I love that logo.
Yeah.
Now, for some time, you and I, we've been trying to schedule a week where we could have you on the podcast as a player, and not just interview you, because I've always wanted to do that anyways, because we go so far back, but I wanted to have you as a player. We finally found a viable date, and it allowed me to curtail the story so that you could be part of that season finale at the time. What were your thoughts going into that? Were you hesitant, or were you eager, excited?
I was maybe a little worried that how I would mesh with the group, because we've seen this throughout our whole life together. We have our friends and work associates, and then when we're together, that's the group of the brothers, right? We have our own language. We
do have a shorthand.
Things. Yeah, definitely. And I was worried, because this is, and you've seen it, with people at my work, where I have a relationship with people at work, and you're like the outsider, not necessarily the outsider, but just to that group, you're the not the normal thing. And how does that work when you have, two people like you and I that are super close and have this shorthand and all that? But it's like the old Seinfeld thing where George Costanza, I know you hate Seinfeld, had his group of Jerry and all his buddies, and then he had Relationship George. And those were separate and they worked. But when the girl, his relationship, started hanging out with Elaine from his friends, the two Georges were converging. It's like Relationship George and Body George are getting, it doesn't work, whatever he was saying. But so I wondered, would I be able to fit in with the current group? Because when we play, we definitely have our own personalities and things like that. I didn't want to F up the group by coming in and like trying to be to one way or another. I wanted to find out how the group was. And luckily I'd been listening to, was it like 25 episodes at that time?
I think it was like 25 or 26.
Like that.
Yeah. Somewhere in there.
So I felt like I knew these people already, or I knew their characters. The people, I didn't know only through their characters and how they talked on the podcast. So that was actually a big help because I kind of knew how to work with them because I knew how Ruby was. I knew how Vratislav was and Eldon or whatever his other name was for a time, and Ralph.
Yeah, he had some other wonky name. I forget.
So I didn't want to come in with my character and be the strong guy or be the silent guy or be the whatever guy. Like I wanted to make sure that those guys still had their parts, right? But I also wanted to
their
have
lady part.
Well, one of them at least. But I wanted to make sure that I didn't mess up the story that I have enjoyed listening to, right? I wanted to add to it as a kind of like in Highlander, right? They have the story, and then in one episode, it's like, oh, and now there's this one guy for this one episode or two episodes, and then he's done, right? It's like He was a fun little thing to add to it, but it didn't take away from the real story. And that was probably the main concern. I wanted to make sure that nothing that I did or how I acted ruined the story that you had or the relationship the characters and the players had.
Well, I personally had a direction how I wanted the season finale to go, and the timing just worked out impeccably.
Impeccably.
That's the word I'm looking for. You messed that up, not me.
Impeccably.
And it just worked out really well because you were able to free up your schedule enough. In fact, you showed up, I think, for 2 weeks in a row. And
yeah,
I was
all
able
my
to
art deadlines were done.
Yeah.
And I had Christmas time off from work. So I was like, I can do it whenever you want. What do you want to do?
And we made the second week a long episode where we were able to cut it into two and parcel it out that way. But I really enjoyed it.
It was fun.
And when I'd asked you, well, what kind of character do you want me to create, or because you wanted me to put together a character for you, you said Tyrannus.
Yeah. Well, how long ago did I start playing with him? Because we played with him.
It's been 10 years.
And our other group so a little backstory on that. This was when, what is it? Was it 4th edition came out and they introduced the Dragonborn?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, I usually like playing the monsters, a dragon, that's great. And I'm reading about them and they're like, oh, they're a noble race and they're this and that. I'm like, fuck that. I'm going to play a fucking badass dragon man. It's going to be not a dragon man, but a dragon man. So my character Tyrannus was just a ruthless cutthroat of a dude. He was a warrior.
Drag on.
He wasn't a drag.
Man in drag?
No, it wasn't that. He was more of a brought up from a wealthy dragon clan. I think they were the Dawnbreakers at the time or whatever it was called. And he basically was the lowest of the litter, like the youngest and the farthest away from the throne, or from the head of the clan. So he was basically, his goal was to kill every single one of his brothers and sisters till he was the heir of the throne, and his father had no other option left but it would pass to him when he passed. And then the idea was he was not going to wait for that and take it from his father, but he was going to do it in the correct way by usurping each one of his brothers and sisters. And I think it was like at 100 or something like that. We had said it.
You were
crazy.
the 100th one, and we produced your siblings along the way.
What was the one dude?
You had Tiberius.
Tiberius, that guy was
the
awesome.
scourge of the nest.
Yeah.
And then we had Rengord.
Boo. Remember him? He was like we imprisoned him or something, and he was like booing at me and shit.
He had a bard for a friend and shit. Yeah.
Bards. There's another class, jeez. Yeah, but so that was the idea with Tyrannus. We had played him over the years, and we played him, I think, to like level 10 at one time, and then we started him over in another thing in a different setting, and
It was actually in 5th edition.
Yeah.
And then, because we did it up at the cabin.
Okay,
for
right.
1 or 2 times, and then we put him on hold, and I rebuilt him.
Yeah.
But did you have any goals bringing Tyrannus into the story?
I wanted him to be the older version of Tyrannus.
Yes.
And I don't know if he had succeeded in his quest or not. The idea would be that this could be in the Tyrannus storyline. It could be canon, or it could be like they do in a lot of the Marvel or DC. It's like this. I don't know if this group and this setting is the same as what we played in, but the character could be, because in those comics they have like Earth X, Earth this, Earth that. It's all the same character, but they all have slight differences. And in the one that I was playing with you, with the brothers, Tyrannus was young. He, wore blue and a blue plate mail, had a broadsword and a shield. He was the tank of the group. He would just get up there and try to get everyone to be pounding on him, and he would be doing cleaves and dragon breath and things like that. In this one, he was the older version of him, and he wasn't as heavily armored, but he did more damage. He had a great sword instead of the one-handed sword.
Yeah.
So that was really fun because it brought a whole new sort of style of play for Tyrannus. I wanted him to be older. I wanted him to be not necessarily a friend of the group. So that's why he would stop in the middle of combat and sit down and be like, hey, we're still fighting. I'm not. I just killed my guy. You guys handle yours,
And he was a few levels ahead of the rest of the group, too.
Yeah, he was
because I wasn't sure if they were going to turn on you, and I need you to be able to hold your own. So
yeah. Well, that was also another reason why I didn't always engage in combat, or I let people go first. Story-wise, it's great because if you have all, caught up and listened to it, we were rival factions searching for the same thing. So there were, 4 of them? Or is that how many were?
Yeah, there was 4.
So I needed to thin out the herd if I was going to, there was a lot of them there. So if one of them got killed, well, great, fine by me. But also it allowed me to be, I was a few levels higher. I was like 6 when they were 4 or something like that, maybe even more. I didn't want to be robbing the thunder from people, right? So it was like, I'll do my attack, and then it's like, yeah, I'm done. I'm cold. I'm going to sit by this brazier while you guys clean up the rest of the fodder units. He was taunting them the whole time, and kind of helping out, but not being as forthright as he could be and stuff. I thought it played out really cool.
Yeah, it did. I mean, did you have any other agendas that you wanted to achieve? Any other beats that you yourself wanted to implement that you hit on? Besides the ones that we had already spoke about. Like before you jumped in?
Well, I know that I wanted this character to be sort of like one of those characters you would see in a series where you don't see him all the time, but when you do, you're like, oh, this guy's a dick, or oh, I love this guy. But he
because he's a dick.
Yeah, because he can be a little bit more crass or a little bit against the group, but that it's not necessarily like he's not out to kill them, but he's there to get whatever he can. It's and then he'll be gone. And hopefully, like my idea is that I would love it for one day for the group to come in. They're going to be, slinging again. And they see me sitting at a table and Broaddus, I was like, oh, fuck, and Ruby's like, I want my book back. And, Eldon's at my side worshiping me for the dragon man that I am, and then, I can poke fun at Rafu's empty socket.
Have an eye for him. I have an eye for you.
But yeah, that was kind of the goal. But I also wanted to revisit this character that you and I had been playing and knew a lot of history of, that you could easily, you didn't have to come up with a lot of stuff. You could kind of work in the personalities that he had, because you DM'd pretty much every adventure he's ever been in,
Yeah. As far as Tyrannus returning, we have plans, you and I, on the horizon of when he'll make his return. Obviously,
you hear that, Ranger?
That's right. And I know him so well that if I had to improvise him, if you couldn't make it, I think that in the last episode they heard a familiar voice and they weren't certain if it was Balls or Tyrannus. At first they weren't certain, and
it's funny because I know who it is.
You do know who it is.
I do,
and. But we're going to leave that for the listeners to listen to. But yeah, I mean, you and I have already had machinations of how to bring him back and where he'll be later on down the line, and how these guys will will find themselves either joining him or butting heads with him. You know, it's almost one of those things where it's the devil, you know. You almost want to team up with somebody, even though they might have fucked you over in the past, because the outcome without that person is worse than if it was with them aiding you.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
so-
they've already seen the Bruce Lee movie Enter the Dragon. We'll wait till the sequel, Return of the Dragon.
Yeah. And with that said, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to this evening's little interview.
Oh, no, nothing. I enjoyed the interview. This was super fun, but it was good. Actually, good seeing you. I haven't seen you in a little spell.
Yeah.
Now in this age, we text or call, and then we try to make time to hang out. We always have our Big Bear trips, which is a blast. I don't know if you guys know this, listeners, but at least once a year we go up to Big Bear, sometimes in the snow, but we drink home brew, we barbecue, we make Cajun red beans and rice or black-eyed peas, and we play D&D and watch shitty movies all weekend. It's pretty. Your movies aren't shitty; those are good movies you bring up.
Thank you.
But the other
Tony's
ones,
beer is good.
Yeah, but yeah, we have a blast up there. So yeah, that's always been a fun treat. So like over this Christmas break when I was able to come by, I remember really looking forward to it, and then especially sort of missing. I used to play in a D&D group at work. Not just the email one, but once a week years ago. And I remember how fun that was. And it's like nowadays it's a bit more, my schedule's a bit more busy. I'm working on a lot of art and got the young boy Jack at home and stuff like that. So having those 2 nights were super fun, especially because it was like 2 weeks in a row. It wasn't like, I had to wait 5 weeks till the next session or things like that.
You were able to, and nobody knew more than you did.
Yeah.
They didn't know more.
Nobody knows more than I do.
That's right.
Say that again. Give me a coin,
Say it
DM.
fast. But like when the session ended, everybody was ended and in the dark. And then when it picked up, everybody was on the same playing field. Like I didn't clue them into anything that you didn't know, and you weren't privy to anything that they didn't know, other than we need to get to a certain point.
Yeah.
And you and I knew that certain point was at some point you need to abscond with that soul crucible.
Yeah.
That was already there at some point, but they had to get it back. So you could take it, but at some point, how they got it back was totally up to you.
I didn't understand why it took so long for them to know that was it.
That they could trade it off or
know
for
that
someone?
was the soul crucible. Because I was like kind of hanging out like, oh, what happened to your eye? Like I didn't want to sit there and just drink the potion and whoop, like I'm gone later, fuckers.
Yeah, because we had that as a backdoor exit, that you had the one potion of invisibility.
Yeah.
So at any time you could just see it, but you couldn't leave. They had to get the soul crucible at some point. And I left that was totally up to you. I didn't take that agency from you at all. So however you guys made it. That was a fun
one. And that was it. Yeah, that couldn't have ended more perfect with the whole eyeball.
Oh, that was awesome.
Bye-bye.
Oh, man, I forgot he had the card. And
I forgot.
Anybody would have totally thought that was well played. Like
it sounded like a setup, because wasn't
totally
Eldon
did.
like, well, don't you have that artifact?
And that was,
Ranger said that.
I give you my word, that was not planned. I had forgot he had the card. And when he played it, I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, this is so great. This is the season finale. What better time for him to fuck this up, man? He looked at the card, he knew what it was, and his eye just melted in its socket. And I thought that was amazing. Couldn't ask for anything better.
That was a fun thing. And I was like kind of, worried after the first night. I was like, oh man, I hope they had a good time. And you're like, and I emailed you like, so did everyone do? You're like, yeah, man, everyone had a good time.
Yeah.
Like, good. Like, I guess that also just shows, like, we've all played, your group and myself, you, me, we've all played Dungeons and Dragons. We all sort of know what parts we have to play, even if we're a new group together, right? Like this, like you were saying, how cool this group was. It's like, yeah, you don't have the one person who's trying to like pickpocket or backstab and, kill people in the group and passing notes to the DM. It's like, maybe that's fun if you're like 15, but that's like how
like
what's
getting
social,
drunk all the time.
Yeah, like that
stupid shit.
That's just like all that stuff's just.
It's supposed to be a cohesive game where everybody's working together, not trying to. I wouldn't say fuck the other person or undermine, because sometimes you do want to undermine them if if you're a guest star. That was the whole purpose of that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be a collaboration of everybody, and everybody had a really good time. I remember that I spoke with Junior the next day at work. He was like, man, Sam's a really good role player. And I guess sometimes I take it for granted that because you and I have played so long that I wouldn't have expected anything less, that's how we act. That's how we play. Yeah. We bring the voices. We bring the energy. We want to do that. And it's cool to see you bring it to that level. You didn't just go Sammy. I mean, you went Sammy.
I was in, I almost said Draconis, Tyrannus, like the whole time. I actually had to go like, all right, so, okay, this is me talking right now. Can I do this? Because it was, that was definitely fun though. I liked, and even the comments that weren't necessarily related to in game, like someone would say something as, oh, he must be having a cold too, or just like, making jokes like in character, I think is fun.
Well, we've got that wry humor too. We always look for the in, just like, I saw that, chink, chink, because we're always on alert for one another because we don't want to show that underbelly.
Can't leave a smog opening, where there's the scale missing.
Put a fucking candle out in your
Black
armpit.
arrow me.
Well, I don't have anything else to add.
It was a great interview, and I just need So this would be for the Hard Slingers. I had mentioned to DM writer Brian earlier. Send him like a quick, paragraph of what your characters sort of look like, hairstyle, if they look like a movie star that we might know. But yeah, I'd love to do, along with the logo and any other kind of icons like the Seekers Foundation stuff, do little, torso portrait shots of the characters in the group. So give DM some of that information, and over the next, month or so, I can maybe start cranking some out.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. We'll go ahead and we'll post those to the website, and we'll put together a gallery page for that, and obviously with credit to the great artiste.
I'm going to draw left-handed. If I draw right-handed, it's over too quickly,
Well, thank you once again, Brother Sammy.
Cheers, brother.
All right. Until next time, keep slinging those hard 20s, dog. Hey, before we get going, let me get up, go hit the head real fast.
All right, brother. Oh, I didn't know that this was a pants optional sort of thing. Dude, what are you doing? Put that shit back on.
I expect yours to be off when I come back, by the way. Your $20 is on the table.
Well, there's the other definition of a slinger.